Okay, so let's start with a question. You're in a high-stakes meeting, maybe even just a tense family discussion,
Yeah.
and you stop talking.
Right.
You just pause and let that silence hang in the air for a second.
Right.
What are you actually signaling? Is it weakness, hesitation, or are you maybe displaying a profound form of power?
It's a trick question for a lot of us, I think, because the default assumption, especially in, a lot of Western or really high-tempo professional settings, is that silence is weakness.
You have to fill the space.
You have to fill the space. It's counted against you. We link it to shyness, a lack of confidence, or even, trying to dodge accountability. It's this awkward gap that we feel this, like, biological need to plug.
Exactly. And our sources for this deep dive, they totally acknowledge that's the starting point for most people,
Mm.
that silence is seen as a negative, a burden. But today, we're going to unpack a radically different perspective.
A completely different take.
Our mission is to dig into sources that explore what they call the latent power in silence, or el camino fiel sumt, and show how some cultures place the highest possible value on keeping quiet.
And what's so fascinating is that core conflict, the very same act, holding back your words, which one culture might see as a failure, as all enough weakness.
Mm-hmm.
Another culture elevates it. They see it as the highest form of maturity and control. The sources argue that silence itself becomes a source of strength.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
But to really get it, I think we have to establish that baseline perception first, just to see how sharp the contrast really is.
Let's do it. So, that baseline, our sources confirm it. In a lot of social and business settings, if you're silent, it's counted against you
Hmm?
immediately.
Right. The assumption is you don't know what to say.
Exactly. You lack conviction, or worse, you lack knowledge. The source materials, they specifically call out this link to shyness al-kajal, or just plain weakness. The quiet person is the one who gets overlooked.
And this is where the cultural context just flips the entire script.
Hmm.
Our sources bring in this, dramatic counter perspective, and they focus on examples from places like Japan,
Mm-hmm.
where silence isn't weakness at all. It's actually seen as a profound form of respect etirement.
And this changes everything, because in this context, silence has a function. It's not just an absence of sound, it's proof of what's happening internally.
What do you mean?
It's evidence that you are actively listening, that you're deeply processing, and really understanding the entire situation, all before you even think about opening your mouth. You're prioritizing comprehension over some kind of knee-jerk performance.
That completely reframes the quiet person in the room. They're not just waiting for their turn. They're actually proving a superior level of engagement.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned this idea of space is critical. What's the specific term the sources use for that?
This is, I think, the most critical piece of knowledge from our sources here. It's the concept of ma. Yes, ma masahat al-samt. And literally it translates as the space of silence. But it's so much deeper than just, an awkward pause.
Okay.
Think of ma like the negative space in a beautiful painting, or the rest note in a piece of music. It's the intentional gap that gives value and weight and meaning to all the speech around it. It defines the whole rhythm of the communication.
That's a great analogy. So the silence isn't empty. It's actually loaded with value.
Mm.
And if we bring that back to, say, the business world, where a lot of us would see that pause as uncertainty, this other perspective sees using ma as the absolute peak of maturity kamet al-nudush.
Precisely. It's not passive at all. It's high-level communication. The person who can create and hold that ma is the one controlling the tempo of the entire conversation.
And the difference is just staggering. We go from seeing silence as a social failure to seeing it as this profound demonstration of maturity.
It's a huge shift.
So if silence is proof of comprehension, that totally changes how we should judge leaders,
Mm.
right? But how does that comprehension become actual power? I mean, if ma is the space, what do the sources say about what this peak of maturity really means?
Well, it's not accidental. This maturity is a highly cultivated skill. It's rooted in self-awareness and control. The sources define it as knowing three very specific things:
Okay.
knowing when to speak, knowing when to listen, and critically, knowing when to intentionally leave space for the other person. That's matata jokulila har masaha. It's about managing the whole interaction, not just your part in it.
That completely changes the power dynamic, especially in a high-stakes room. In a fast, aggressive negotiation, everyone feels pressure to just react instantly to counter every single point.
Yeah.
So how does this MAW framework actually play out when the pressure is on?
The sources are very clear about this. If you stay silent during a debate or a heated discussion, you're seen as respectful mutarama. But even more than that, you're signaling that you're not just reacting to
You're
noise.
not getting pulled in.
You're not. You're absorbing the information, and crucially, you are not being controlled by the other person's emotional pace.
I have to push back a little on that, though, because it sounds great in theory, but in a loud meeting, where people are talking over each other,
Mhm.
doesn't being intentionally silent just mean you're going to get interrupted?
Yeah.
How do the sources handle that risk?
And that is the absolute key distinction the sources make. It's the difference between silence born from inadequacy daf and silence born from control dat all nafs.
Okay.
When your silence is hesitant or accidental, it invites interruption. But when that silence, that ma, is intentional, when it's controlled and projects presence, it actually makes the other person wait. You are setting the rhythm, and rhythm is a form of control.
That's fascinating. So the strength comes from the intention behind it. And this is where it gets really interesting for me, because the sources don't just promise respect, they outline actual hard strategic benefits, two of them specifically.
Absolutely. So the first benefit is that this controlled silence gives you prestige or authority. The Arabic term is haiba. The person who speaks less but speaks with intention, they just have a certain gravitas.
Right.
I mean, think about it. If you speak 6 times in a meeting and your colleague speaks once, but that one time comes after a 5-second deliberate pause,
Yeah.
whose voice has more weight?
One who made the whole room hold its breath.
Yeah,
The words become more valuable just because they're rare.
exactly. Scarcity creates value. And the second benefit, which is maybe the most important insight here, is that staying silent clearly demonstrates that you have ironclad self-control, dat al nafs.
That all naps. Self-control. That feels like the linchpin for this whole idea.
It's the core difference. When your silence comes from fear or you're just scrambling for something to say, that's a lack of control. You're being controlled by the situation. But when you actively choose silence, when you consciously use ma and you hold back that impulse to just react or fill the void, you are showing complete mastery over your own internal state, over your emotions, over the flow of information.
And that mastery is a huge strategic asset, especially in a conflict. If you're silent, you're not revealing your hand, you're not blurting out something defensive that the other side can use, you're not overcommitting.
It's defensive power. The quiet person isn't shy. They might be demonstrating the highest level of psychological strength in the entire room. This transforms silence from a vacuum into this powerful, visible sign of resilience. It's an assertive choice not to be rushed.
You can see this in public life all the time. Think of a leader who immediately reacts to every little accusation. That kind of reflexive talking, and often is a lack of confidence, right? A fear being ignored.
Totally.
But the person who takes that intentional beat, that pause full of ma before they give a measured response, they project unshakable authority.
That's the real power dynamic. The sources are implicitly setting up a contrast between that kind of patience and the drive to just be the loudest or fastest voice. Volume often signals a lack of confidence. Controlled silence signals certainty.
So we've connected ma, respect, prestige, the heba, and this psychological strength of self-control, dat al-nafs. It feels like it's all building to one big, unified conclusion.
It is, and the sources summarize it perfectly.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener, who's trying to navigate these complex environments? The ultimate takeaway the sources offer is this. True power al-quaya is not about the volume or the frequency of your speech. It is defined by control, by al-tahakum.
And that control isn't shown by raising your voice mo rafa al-sawt. It's shown by the intention behind both your speech and your silence. If you're the one deciding the pace, the pauses, the moments for listening, you're the one in control no matter how much you actually spoke.
It's a total inversion of that common idea that the person who fills the most airtime is the one who wins. These sources are suggesting the real winner is the person who strategically controls the air itself, the one who uses ma to their advantage.
So think about how this reframes every meeting or personal discussion you have. When you choose to be silent, are you demonstrating that deep listening we talked about? Or are you being seen as someone without a voice? And the difference, we have to stress this, is intent.
Right.
Is the silence just happening to you, or are you the one consciously creating it?
It really shows how deeply our cultural norms shape how we interpret basic human interaction. I mean, the exact same action, just staying quiet,
Yeah.
can be seen as the highest virtue or a total failure, all based on the cultural framework and what people perceive your intention to be.
It's a call to be more observant, really. Not just listening to the words, but watching the silences. Who is forcing the space? Who is using that silence to gain leverage or maybe just to show respect?
It's fascinating. We went from seeing silence as this burden of accountability, something you have to rush to fix, to understanding it as a cultivated strategic skill. It's a dedicated space, this ma, that can elevate communication, project authority, and proof you have superior psychological control. That knowledge gives you a whole new lens to see your own behavior.
And if true power is control, as these sources suggest, then the key question to ask yourself is, how often are you confusing volume with actual impact? We feel like we have to talk to have influence, but maybe the greatest control comes from consciously choosing not to speak, reserving your energy for the one moment that really counts.
So I want you to take this one final thought into your next conversation, a client pitch, a family debate, whatever it is. Think about the strategic use of ma. What conversations in your own life might be completely transformed if you just consciously introduce that intentional pause? Watch the power dynamics, not just based on who's talking, but on who is controlling the silence. You might find the quietest person is actually running the show.